What if you're working tirelessly but still feel trapped in a cycle of financial stress, with no clear path to freedom? What if your reliance on traditional retirement plans like 401(k) leaves you vulnerable to market crashes and an uncertain future? What if fear of failure or a scarcity mindset keeps you from taking the steps needed to build wealth? Rich Dads Retire Young, Retire Rich by Robert Kiyosaki offers a powerful solution, teaching you how to leverage your mindset, create a strategic plan, and take bold actions to achieve financial independence. To overcome these obstacles and unlock a life of abundance, you must read this book and apply its transformative strategies. Welcome to this podcast summary of Rich Dads Retire Young, Retire Rich by Robert Kiyosaki, a transformative guide that challenges conventional wisdom about money, work, and retirement. We'll dive deep into the story of how Robert and his wife, Kim, went from being nearly broke to financially free in less than a decade. This isn't just a how-to manual. It's a journey of mindset, planning, and action, inspired by the teachings of Kiyosaki's mentor, Rich Dad. Through the lens of leverage, we'll explore how you, too, can retire young and retire rich. So, settle in, open your mind, and let's begin. Introduction: The power of leverage. Imagine sitting in a cozy cabin on a snowy mountain in British Columbia, the fire crackling, the air thick with dreams and doubts. It's New Year's Day, 1985, and Robert Kiyosaki, his wife Kim, and their friend Larry Clark are setting goals, not just for the year, but for a lifetime. Robert and Kim are nearly out of money, their confidence shaken after the collapse of Robert's first business venture. Yet, in this moment, Larry challenges them to think bigger. Why don't we write a plan to become financially free? The idea feels impossible, but it sparks a journey that will change their lives forever. This is the heart of Retire Young, Retire Rich, the fifth book in Kiyosaki's Rich Dad series. Unlike his earlier works, which focused on cash flow, this book is about leverage, the power to amplify your efforts and achieve extraordinary results. Drawing from the biblical story of David and Goliath, Kiyosaki's Rich Dad taught him that leverage, like David's slingshot, can make the small defeat the mighty. Leverage isn't just about money. It's about your mind, your plan, and your actions. Over the next hour, we'll explore how Robert and Kim used these forms of leverage to retire in 1994 at ages 47 and 37, with enough passive income to live freely, and how you can apply these principles to your own life. The book is divided into 4 sections: the leverage of your mind, your plan, your actions, and your first step. Each section builds on the idea that financial freedom begins with how you think, what you plan, and what you do. Let's start with the most powerful form of leverage, your mind. Section 1. The leverage of your mind. Imagine a young Robert Kiyosaki sitting across from his mentor, Rich Dad, in a small office in Hawaii, absorbing lessons that would change his life forever. This section isn't about dollars and cents. It's about the most powerful asset you possess, your mind. We'll explore how Robert learned to harness the leverage of his thoughts, words, and beliefs to build a path to financial freedom. Through stories, lessons, and examples from the book, you'll discover how to transform your own mindset and take the first step toward retiring young and rich. So, settle in, open your mind, and let's dive into the world of leverage. The spark of a new reality. Picture a snowy mountain cabin in British Columbia, January 1st, 1985. Robert Kiyosaki and his wife, Kim, sit by a crackling fire, their friend Larry Clark across from them. The air is heavy, not just with the chill of winter, but with the weight of uncertainty. Robert's first business, a company selling Velcro wallets, has collapsed. Their bank account is nearly empty, their confidence battered. They're at a crossroads, questioning everything. It's here, in this moment of vulnerability, that Larry poses a question that will change their lives. Why don't we write a plan to become financially free? The idea feels like a distant dream, almost absurd, but it plants a seed, one that echoes the teachings of Robert's mentor, Rich Dad, the father of his childhood friend and a successful entrepreneur. Unlike Robert's poor dad, a highly educated but financially struggling school superintendent, Rich Dad believed that wealth begins not with money, but with the mind. In Retire Young, Retire Rich, Section 1 is where Kiyosaki lays the foundation for this truth. Your mind is your greatest lever, capable of moving mountains of doubt and opening doors to abundance. Let's step back to the lessons that shaped Robert's journey and see how they can shape yours. Words as leverage, the power of rich and poor words. Imagine a young Robert, barely a teenager, sitting in Rich Dad's cluttered office, surrounded by the hum of his businesses. Rich Dad leans forward, his eyes sharp, and says, "Your words are your most powerful form of leverage. Poor people use poor words, and poor words create poor people. Rich people use rich words, and rich words create rich people." This lesson, shared in Chapter 2 of the book, is the cornerstone of Section 1. Words aren't just sounds, they're the building blocks of your reality. Rich Dad explained that the words you use about money shape your thoughts, and your thoughts shape your actions. Say, "I can't afford it," and you shut down possibility, trapping yourself in a cycle of scarcity. Say, "How can I afford it?" and you open a door to creativity and opportunity. Robert learned this the hard way. As a young man, he often echoed his poor dad's words, "Money doesn't grow on trees," or "we'll never be rich." These phrases were like chains, binding him to a mindset of limitation. One vivid example from the book comes from Robert's early 20s, when he was working as a pilot in the Vietnam War. He dreamed of wealth, but felt it was out of reach. One day, he complained to Rich Dad about not having enough money to invest. Rich Dad challenged him, "You're using poor words. Instead of saying I can't, ask how can I?" Robert scoffed, but Rich Dad pushed him to try it. "How can I invest with no money?" Robert asked reluctantly. The question felt awkward, but it sparked a shift. Rich Dad suggested looking for small opportunities, perhaps a part-time job to save for investments or a low-cost deal. This simple change in wording forced Robert to think creatively, planting the seed for his future success. Kiyosaki emphasizes that this isn't just positive thinking, it's about rewiring your brain. In the book, he shares a practical exercise. Write down the words you use when you talk about money. Do you say, "I'll never get out of debt," or "investing is too risky"? These are poor words, rooted in fear and limitation. Replace them with rich words. "How can I pay off my debt faster?" Or "What can I learn to make investing safer?" Try this for a week, Kiyosaki suggests, and watch how your perspective shifts. Your words become a lever, amplifying your ability to see opportunities where others see obstacles. Context versus content, shaping your financial reality. Let's go deeper into Rich Dad's teachings, to a concept that struck Robert like a lightning bolt: the difference between context and content. Context is your underlying belief system, your reality about money. Content is the specific actions or investments you make. Most people focus on content, buying stocks, saving for retirement, without examining their context. If your context is one of scarcity or fear, no amount of financial know-how will make you rich. In Chapter 3, Kiyosaki recounts a story from his youth that illustrates this. At age 15, he wanted to buy a car, but had no money. His poor dad said, "You'll have to wait until you're older and have a better job." That was a scarcity context. Money is hard to come by, so you must wait. Rich Dad, however, asked, "What would you do if there were no risk and no money required to get that car?" Robert laughed, calling it a stupid question. "Such a world doesn't exist," he snapped. But Rich Dad pressed, "If you believe it's impossible, it is. Change your context, and you'll find a way." This question became a turning point. Robert began to imagine a world where he could earn money creatively, mowing lawns, delivering newspapers, or finding a deal on a used car. His context shifted from "I can't" to "I can," and within months, he'd saved enough to buy a beat-up but functional car. The lesson? Your context determines what's possible. If you believe wealth requires a high-paying job or a big inheritance, you'll stay stuck. If you believe wealth comes from leveraging opportunities, you'll find them. Kiyosaki shares another example from his own life, post-Vietnam, when he and his brother wanted to buy a rental property. They had little money and no real estate experience. Friends and family warned them, "Real estate is risky. You'll lose everything." That was a fear-based context. But Rich Dad's teachings echoed in Robert's mind. Risk comes from ignorance, not the investment. He and his brother studied real estate, found a small apartment building with seller financing, and used the tenant's rent to cover the mortgage. Their context, believing they could learn and act, turned a risky venture into a profitable one. The book challenges you to examine your own context. Do you believe money is scarce, or that it flows abundantly to those who solve problems? Do you see investing as a gamble, or as a skill you can master? Kiyosaki suggests a mental exercise. Imagine your ideal financial future, free of limitations. What would you do if money and risk weren't barriers? This isn't fantasy. It's a way to stretch your context and uncover possibilities you've overlooked. Overcoming the fear of risk. One of the biggest barriers to wealth is the fear of risk, and Rich Dad had a lot to say about it. In Chapter 4, Kiyosaki tackles the common phrase, investing is risky. Rich Dad argued that this is a poor word, rooted in ignorance. Investing isn't risky, he said. Not knowing what you're doing is risky. This lesson hit home for Robert after his wallet business failed in 1979. He'd taken a big risk without enough knowledge, and it cost him dearly. But instead of swearing off risk, he learned from it, guided by Rich Dad's wisdom. Kiyosaki shares a story from the book about a friend who refused to invest in real estate because it's too risky. This friend put all his money in mutual funds, believing they were safe. When the stock market dipped, he lost 40% of his savings. Meanwhile, Robert and Kim invested in a small rental property, using a bank loan, leverage, and their financial education to ensure the tenant's rent covered the mortgage. When the market fluctuated, their property still generated income. The difference? Robert's friend had a context of fear and ignorance, while Robert and Kim had a context of learning and calculated risk. Rich Dad taught that risk is relative. A doctor performing surgery isn't taking a risk if they're trained. It's risky only for an untrained person. Similarly, investing becomes less risky as you gain knowledge. Kiyosaki shares an example of how he and Kim learned to evaluate real estate deals. They studied market trends, learned to read financial statements, and practiced negotiating with sellers. By their third property, what seemed risky to others was routine to them. The leverage of their mind, knowledge, and confidence turned risk into opportunity. The book offers a practical tip. Start small to build your financial education. Robert and Kim didn't begin with a 100-unit apartment complex. They started with a single rental house. Each deal taught them something new, reducing risk with every step. Kiyosaki encourages you to do the same. Pick one area, stocks, real estate, or a small business, and study it. Read books, attend seminars, or find a mentor. As your knowledge grows, your fear of risk shrinks, and your mind becomes a powerful lever. The Looking Glass, stepping into a new world. One of the most striking metaphors in Section 1 is the looking glass, inspired by Alice in Wonderland. Rich Dad asked Robert, "What kind of world do you want to live in?" Most people live in a world of scarcity or security, believing they must work hard for money or settle for a modest retirement. But Rich Dad challenged Robert to step through the looking glass into a world of abundance, where money works for you. In Chapter 5, Kiyosaki recounts a moment in 1985 during that New Year's planning session with Kim and Larry. Robert was skeptical, still reeling from his business failure. "Financial freedom sounds nice, but it's not realistic," he said. Larry, echoing Rich Dad, pushed back. "It's only unrealistic if you believe it is. Imagine a world where you're free. What would that look like?" This exercise forced Robert to confront his limiting beliefs. He began to envision a life where he and Kim owned assets that paid for their lifestyle, freeing them to travel, learn, and give back. This shift wasn't easy. Robert shares how his poor dad's voice lingered in his mind, warning him to play it safe and get a good job. But Rich Dad's question, "What kind of world do you want?" became a beacon. Robert and Kim decided they wanted a world of abundance, where money was a tool, not a master. This new context drove them to take risks, learn from failures, and keep moving forward. The book offers a powerful exercise. Write down your vision of an abundant world. What would your life look like if money weren't a barrier? Would you travel, start a business, or help others? By defining this world, you begin to see opportunities that align with it. Kiyosaki shares an example of a friend who wanted to retire early to volunteer for a charity. By shifting her context from "I can't afford to retire" to "How can I create passive income?" she started a small online business that eventually funded her dream. The looking glass isn't magic. It's a mindset that reveals what's possible. Learning from mistakes, the school of life. Rich Dad had a unique view on failure, one that Robert internalized over years of setbacks. In Chapter 6, Kiyosaki explains that the school system punishes mistakes, but life rewards those who learn from them. The only way to become rich, Rich Dad said, is to make mistakes, learn, and keep going. This lesson was critical for Robert, especially after his wallet business collapsed, leaving him and Kim nearly broke. Kiyosaki shares a story from the book about his first real estate deal in the 1970s. He found a small condo in Hawaii, priced low because the seller was motivated. Excited but inexperienced, Robert made an offer without fully understanding the financing. The deal fell through, and he felt humiliated. But Rich Dad saw it differently. You didn't fail, you learned. Now you know what to ask next time. Robert took this to heart, studying financing options and trying again. His next deal succeeded, netting him a small but steady cash flow. That mistake was a lesson, and the lesson was leverage. This principle applies to everyone. Kiyosaki tells of a woman in one of his seminars who feared investing because she'd lost money in stocks years ago. That loss was your tuition, he told her. What did it teach you? She realized she'd invested without understanding the market. Armed with this insight, she studied stock analysis and started small, eventually building a modest portfolio. Mistakes, Kiyosaki argues, are your greatest teachers if you let them be. Practical steps to leverage your mind. Section 1 isn't just philosophy, it's a call to action. Kiyosaki offers practical steps to leverage your mind, drawn from his and Kim's journey. First, audit your words. For 1 week, write down every money-related phrase you say or think. Replace "I can't" with "how can I," and notice how your brain starts searching for solutions. Second, examine your context. Do you believe wealth is for others or for you? Write a paragraph describing your ideal financial world, free of limitations. Third, commit to financial education. Pick one area, say real estate, and read a book or take a course. Start small, like Robert and Kim did, and build your confidence. Kiyosaki shares a final example from the book. A couple who attended his seminar in the 1980s. They were stuck in low-paying jobs, convinced they'd never retire. Inspired by Rich Dad's teachings, they changed their context, asking, how can we create passive income? They started by renting out a spare room in their home, using the income to save for a small rental property. Within 5 years, they owned 3 properties, generating enough cash flow to quit their jobs. Their secret? They leveraged their minds first, believing wealth was possible, then took action. Conclusion: your mind, your greatest lever. As the fire in that British Columbia cabin dimmed, Robert and Kim made a decision that would define their future. They chose to believe in a world where financial freedom was possible, not just for the lucky few, but for them. Section 1 of Rich Dad's Retire Young, Retire Rich is a wake-up call. Your mind is your greatest asset, and how you use it determines your financial destiny. By changing your words, challenging your context, embracing risk through education, and learning from mistakes, you can step through the looking glass into a world of abundance. Rich Dad's lessons. Words as leverage, context over content, risk as ignorance, and mistakes as teachers are universal. They worked for Robert and Kim, who went from broke to financially free in less than a decade. They can work for you, too. The question is, will you leverage your mind to create the life you want? As Rich Dad said, inside every person is a David, waiting to slay the Goliath of doubt and fear. Your journey to retiring young and rich begins with a single thought. It's possible. Section 2. The leverage of your plan. Picture a snowy cabin in British Columbia on New Year's Day, 1985. Robert and Kim Kiyosaki, nearly broke and reeling from a failed business, sit with their friend Larry Clark, daring to dream of financial freedom. This isn't just a wish. It's the start of a plan that will lead them to retire in 1994 at ages 47 and 37, financially free. Kiyosaki reveals how a deliberate, leveraged plan turned their dream into reality. We'll explore Rich Dad's teachings on planning, the power of a fast track to wealth, and real-life examples that show how you, too, can create a plan to retire young and rich. So, grab a notebook Open your mind, and let's begin. The cabin that changed everything. The fire crackles in that British Columbia cabin, casting a warm glow over Robert, Kim, and Larry. It's January 1st, 1985, and the weight of the past year hangs heavy. Robert's Velcro wallet business has collapsed, leaving him and Kim with little money and shaken confidence. They're at a low point, questioning their next move. Then Larry, with a spark in his eye, asks a question that cuts through the gloom. Why don't we write a plan to become financially free? Robert hesitates. Financial freedom? With no money, no job, and a string of failures? It sounds impossible. But as the conversation unfolds, Robert hears the echo of his mentor, Rich Dad, in his mind. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. This moment, described in Chapter 7 of Rich Dad's Retire Young, Retire Rich, marks the birth of a plan that will change Robert and Kim's lives. Section 2 is about the leverage of a plan, not a vague New Year's resolution, but a deliberate strategy with a clear goal, passive income that exceeds expenses, freeing you from the need to work. By 1994, Robert and Kim achieved this, retiring with $85,000 to $120,000 in annual income from investments, while spending less than $50,000 a year. Their secret? A plan that leveraged time, focus, and assets. Let's dive into Rich Dad's teachings and see how you can craft your own plan to retire young and rich. The power of a plan. Why most plan to be poor. Growing up in Hawaii, Robert had two fathers with starkly different views on planning. His poor dad, a highly educated school superintendent, believed in working hard, saving money, and relying on a pension. When I retire, he'd say, my income will go down, so I'll need to live frugally. This, Rich Dad pointed out, was a plan to be poor. In Chapter 8, Kiyosaki explains that most people unconsciously plan for scarcity, expecting less income in retirement and hoping government programs or 401(k)s will save them. But Rich Dad warned, in the information age, you're on your own. If you don't plan to be rich, you're planning to be poor. Rich Dad, a successful entrepreneur, taught Robert that a plan is a lever, a tool to amplify your efforts. Without one, you're like a bird on a fence, dreaming of flight, but never taking off. Robert shares a story from his 20s, when he wanted to buy a sports car, but had no savings. His poor dad advised waiting for a raise, a slow and limited plan. Rich Dad, however, asked, what's your plan to get that car? Robert hadn't thought about it. Rich Dad suggested creating a side income, like selling used goods or starting a small venture. This lesson stuck. A plan turns dreams into reality by giving you direction and urgency. In the book, Kiyosaki emphasizes that a plan must have three elements: a clear goal, a timeline, and a focus on assets. Robert and Kim's goal was financial freedom, passive income exceeding expenses. Their timeline was 10 years, from 1985 to 1995. Their focus was building assets like real estate and businesses, not relying on a paycheck. This clarity transformed their cabin conversation into a roadmap. The book challenges you to ask, what's your plan? Are you planning for scarcity, security, or abundance? Most people don't even know, drifting through life without a map. Fast plan versus slow plan, the race to freedom. One of Rich Dad's most striking lessons is the difference between a fast plan and a slow plan. In Chapter 9, Kiyosaki explains that a slow plan is the default for most. Work 40 years, save a little, invest in mutual funds, and hope for a modest retirement at 65. This plan, tied to the industrial age, assumes job security and pensions, but in the information age, it's a risky bet. Kiyosaki warns of a looming crisis. With 75 million baby boomers retiring, withdrawing billions from markets and government programs, the system could falter. A slow plan leaves you vulnerable. A fast plan, however, is about speed and leverage. It's building or acquiring assets that generate passive income quickly, freeing you to retire young and use your time to get richer. Robert and Kim chose a fast plan in 1985, aiming to retire in 10 years. They didn't wait for more money or the perfect moment. They started with nothing, leveraging their minds and determination. By 1994, their assets produced enough income to set them free, proving the power of a fast plan. Kiyosaki shares an example from the book, a couple he met at a seminar in the 1980s. They were in their 30s, stuck in dead-end jobs, with no savings. Inspired by Rich Dad's teachings, they created a fast plan to retire in 7 years. Their goal was $2,000 a month in passive income. They started by buying a duplex, living in one unit and renting out the other. The rent covered the mortgage, and they saved the surplus to buy another property. Within 5 years, they owned 3 rentals, generating $1,500 a month. By year 7, a small side business pushed them over their goal. Their fast plan worked because they focused on assets and acted with urgency. Contrast this with a slow plan example, Robert's friend Mike, who followed the conventional path. Mike worked as an accountant, saved diligently, and invested in a 401k. By his 50s, he had a nest egg, but a market dip slashed its value, and he couldn't retire. Mike's slow plan left him dependent on factors he couldn't control. The book asks, are you on a fast or slow plan? A fast plan requires courage and education, but it's the path to freedom. The 3 paths to wealth, skills as leverage. Rich Dad taught that a fast plan relies on 3 paths to wealth, increasing business skills, money management skills, and investment skills. In Chapter 10, Kiyosaki details how Robert and Kim used these skills to build their plan. Let's explore each path and see how they applied them. Business skills. Rich Dad believed that owning a business is the fastest way to wealth, as it leverages other people's time and talents. Robert and Kim didn't start with a massive corporation. They began small. After their 1985 plan, they launched a financial education business, teaching others about money. It was modest at first, but it grew into a publishing company that became a major income source. Kiyosaki shares an example of a seminar attendee, Sarah, who started a part-time tutoring business. By hiring other tutors, she turned it into a system that ran her income, generating $3,000 a month without her daily involvement. Business skills gave her leverage. Money management skills. Managing money is about making it work for you, not just saving it. Robert and Kim learned to budget their income, redirecting every spare dollar into investments. They avoided consumer debt, like credit card purchases, and used cheap, like debt, to buy income-producing assets. In the book, Kiyosaki tells of a friend who struggled with overspending. By creating a budget and cutting unnecessary expenses, like daily lattes, he saved $500 a month, which he invested in a stock that paid dividends. Within 3 years, those dividends funded a down payment on a rental property. Money management skills turned small savings into big opportunities. Investment skills. Investing is about acquiring assets that generate passive income. Robert and Kim focused on real estate, starting with a single rental property in 1986. They used a low down payment loan, leveraging the bank's money, and the rent covered the mortgage plus profit. By reinvesting profits, they built a portfolio that fueled their retirement. Another example is John, a student of Kiyosaki's, who learned to invest in stocks. Stocks like undervalued companies, studying financial statements and market trends. His first $1,000 investment grew to $5,000 in 2 years, which he used to buy a small rental unit. Investment skills gave him the confidence to act. These paths, business, money management, investment skills, were the pillars of Robert and Kim's plan. They didn't master them overnight. They learned through study and action, starting where they were. The book encourages you to pick one path to focus on. What skill can you develop today? A small step, like reading a book on real estate, can set you on a fast plan. The exit strategy. Why time is your greatest asset. A plan without an exit strategy is just a wish, Rich Dad said. In Chapter 11, Kiyosaki stresses that a fast plan needs a clear endpoint, financial freedom. For Robert and Kim, it meant retiring young so they could use their time to get rich. Rich Dad defined rich as $1 million or more in annual income, per Forbes. By retiring early, Robert and Kim freed up time to build businesses and investments, unburdened by the need for a paycheck to live paycheck to paycheck. Kiyosaki shares a powerful example from their journey. In 1985, 3 years into their plan, Robert and Kim faced a tough moment. They were offered a lucrative job that would have delayed their retirement by years. It was tempting, but they'd set a 10-year timeline, and they stuck to it. Their exit strategy, retire by 1995, kept them focused. Focused, like a captain steering through a fog. By 1994, Their assets, real estate, and a small business produced enough income to exit the rat race. Another example is a couple from the book, Tom and Susan, who plan to retire in 10 years by 45. Their exit strategy was $4,000 a month in passive income. They started with a small vending machine business, placing machines in local stores. The profits funded their first rental property, then a second. Their timeline created urgency, pushing them to learn and act quickly. By year 9, they'd hit their goal, retiring to travel and volunteer. Their exit strategy turned their plan into reality. The book challenges you to define your exit strategy. What's your number? How much passive income do you need to be free? What's your timeline? A deadline creates leverage, forcing you to prioritize, and moves you closer to your goal. Without it, you risk drifting like a ship without a port. Overcoming obstacles, the leverage of focus. Planning isn't easy. In Chapter 12, Robert reflects on the obstacles they faced: self-doubt, setbacks, and naysayers. After their business failure, Robert feared another flop. Friends warned them against real estate, saying, "What if the market crashes?" But their plan gave them focus, a lever to push past fear. Rich Dad taught, focus is power. A plan keeps you on track, even when the world tries to pull you off. Kiyosaki shares a story of a seminar attendee, Lisa, who faced resistance. Her family mocked her plan to retire in 8 years, saying, "You're not rich enough to be rich." Lisa's plan, to build a portfolio of 3 rental properties, kept her grounded. She started with a condo, using a low down payment loan, and ignored the doubters. Each property deal strengthened her confidence, and by year 7, her income was enough to quit her job. Her focus turned obstacles into stepping stones. The book offers a practical tip: review your plan weekly. Robert and Kim did this, adjusting their strategy as they learned. If a real estate deal fell through, they'd analyze why and try again. This habit kept them moving forward, like a runner pacing a race. You can do the same. Set aside time to check your goals, track progress, and stay focused. Practical steps to leverage your plan. Section 2 ends with a call to action. Kiyosaki offers practical steps to create a leveraged plan, drawn from his and Kim's journey. First, define your exit strategy. Calculate your monthly passive income needed for freedom and set a timeline, e.g., 5 or 10 years. Second, choose one of the 3 paths: business, money management, or investment skills, and take a small step, like attending a real estate workshop or starting a side hustle. Third, write your plan down and review it weekly, adjusting as you learn and grow. A final example from the book: a man named Paul, who attended Kiyosaki's seminar in 1986. He was a teacher with no savings, dreaming of retirement. Inspired by Rich Dad, he set a 10-year plan to retire in 10 years with $2,000 a month in passive income. He started by saving $200 a month from his paycheck, using it to buy a stock that paid dividends. He reinvested the dividends and learned about real estate, buying his first rental in year 3. By year 10, he owned 2 rentals and a small online store, hitting his goal. His plan leveraged small actions into big results. Conclusion: your plan, your freedom. As the sun rose over that British Columbia cabin, Robert and Kim had made a choice. They chose a fast plan, a 10-year roadmap to financial freedom, powered by assets and urgency. Section 2 of Rich Dad's Retire Young, Retire Rich is a wake-up call. A plan is your lever to turn dreams into reality. By setting a clear goal, choosing a fast track, building skills, defining an exit strategy, and staying focused on your path, you can retire young and rich. Rich Dad's lessons: plan for abundance, not scarcity. Focus on assets, not paychecks. Use time as leverage, are timeless. Robert and Kim went from broke to freedom in less than a decade because they dared to plan differently. Your journey starts with a question: what's your plan? Will you drift on a slow path or race toward freedom? The power is in your hands, your mind, your plan, your future. Section 3. The leverage of your actions. In a world where only 5% of Americans achieve financial independence, what separates the rich from the rest? Action. Section 3 is where the rubber meets the road, as Kiyosaki outlines the practical steps Robert and Kim took to turn their plan into reality. It's not enough to think differently or plan strategically. You must act, and act consistently, leveraging three key asset classes: real estate, paper assets, and businesses. From plan to action, the cabin's promise. It's New Year's Day, 1985, in a cozy cabin nestled in the British Columbia Mountains. Robert and Kim Kiyosaki sit with their friend Larry Clark, their breath visible in the chilly air. The collapse of Robert's Velcro wallet business has left them nearly broke, their confidence bruised. Yet, Larry's challenge to write a plan for financial freedom has sparked hope. They commit to a 10-year plan to retire with passive income exceeding their expenses. But as Rich Dad, Robert's mentor, always said, a plan without action is just a dream. Section 3, starting in Chapter 13, is where Robert and Kim's story shifts from intention to execution, leveraging action to build a life of abundance. Rich Dad taught that the rich don't work for money. They acquire assets that work for them. By 1994, Robert and Kim retired at ages 47 and 37, with $85,000 to $120,000 in annual income from investments, spending less than $50,000 a year. Their success wasn't luck, it was deliberate action in three areas: real estate, paper assets, and businesses. Let's explore each through Kiyosaki's stories and examples to see how you can leverage action in your own journey. Real estate, leveraging other people's money. Real estate was the cornerstone of Robert and Kim's wealth, and Rich Dad called it the ultimate form of leverage. In Chapter 14, Kiyosaki explains that real estate allows you to use good debt, money borrowed to buy income-producing assets. Unlike a personal home, which Rich Dad called a liability, a rental property is an asset if tenants' rent covers the mortgage and generates profit. Robert and Kim started small, with no money of their own, using bank loans to buy their first property in 1986. Kiyosaki shares a vivid example from the book. In Hawaii, they found a small rental house listed for $50,000, with a motivated seller. With just a $5,000 down payment, borrowed from a friend, they secured a loan, and the tenant's rent paid the mortgage plus $100 a month in cash flow. That $100 was small, but it was leverage. The bank's money and the tenant's rent worked for them. They reinvested profits into another property, then another, building a portfolio that fueled their retirement. By 1994, their real estate generated tens of thousands annually, all from starting with nothing. Another example involves a seminar attendee, Maria, who was inspired by Robert's teachings. A single mother with a modest income, Maria feared real estate was too risky. But she took action, starting with a duplex in her hometown. She lived in one unit and rented the other, covering her mortgage and saving $200 a month. Within 3 years, she bought a second duplex, then a small apartment building. Her cash flow grew to $2,000 a month, allowing her to quit her job. Maria's action, starting small and leveraging debt, turned fear into freedom. Rich Dad's lesson: real estate isn't about flipping houses for quick profits. It's about long-term cash flow and appreciation. Kiyosaki offers a hot tip: look for properties with strong rental demand and motivated sellers. Study your local market, learn to negotiate, and use good debt to amplify your returns. Robert and Kim's success came from acting, even when they were scared, proving that small steps can lead to big wins. Paper assets, leveraging knowledge. Paper assets, stocks, bonds, and options, are another path to wealth, but only if you leverage knowledge. In Chapter 15, Kiyosaki warns against the buy and hold mantra peddled by financial advisors. Rich Dad taught that passive investing in mutual funds is risky because it relies on market ups and downs. Instead, the rich use financial education to find high-return, low-risk opportunities. Robert shares a story from his early investing days. In the late 1980s, he and Kim studied a small tech company whose stock was undervalued. After analyzing its financial statements, a skill they learned from Rich Dad, they invested $2,000. Within a year, the stock doubled, netting them a $2,000 profit. They reinvested this into another deal, compounding their gains. Their action wasn't blind luck. It was informed by study and strategy. Another example is Tom, a student from Kiyosaki's seminars. Tom was a mechanic with no investing experience, but he was determined to act. He started by reading books on stock analysis and joined an investment club. His first investment was $500 in a utility stock, paying a 5% dividend. The $25 annual dividend was small, but he reinvested it, buying more shares. Over 5 years, his portfolio grew to $10,000, which he used as a down payment on a rental property. Tom's leverage was his willingness to learn and act, turning a small sum into a stepping stone. Kiyosaki's advice: paper assets require education, not gambling. Learn to read financial statements, study market trends, and start small. A hot tip from the book: look for undervalued stocks or use options to control assets with minimal cash. Robert and Kim didn't rely on market luck. They leveraged knowledge to make informed moves, and you can too. Businesses, leveraging systems and people. The third asset class, businesses, is what Rich Dad called the B quadrant, where you create systems that generate income without your daily involvement. In Chapter 16, Kiyosaki explains that employees and self-employed people trade time for money, but business owners leverage other people's time and talents. After retiring in 1994, Robert and Kim built a publishing company, a mining company, and a tech company, each amplifying their wealth. A key example is their financial education business, started in 1985. With little money, they began teaching seminars on money management, charging modest fees. They hired others to help run events, creating a system that scaled. By the early 1990s, this business generated significant income, even when they weren't teaching. Their action, starting small and building a system, was pure leverage. Another story involves Lisa, a seminar attendee who worked as a nurse. Tired of long hours, she acted on Rich Dad's advice to start a business. She launched a small online store selling medical supplies, initially packing orders herself. As sales grew, she hired a part-time assistant and outsourced shipping. Within 4 years, her business produced $3,000 a month in passive income, allowing her to cut back on nursing. Lisa's leverage was creating a system that worked without her constant effort. Rich Dad's lesson: you don't need a massive corporation. A small business, like a side hustle or online store, can be an asset if it generates passive income. Kiyosaki's hot tip: focus on systems, processes that run without you. Hire others, automate tasks, and reinvest profits into more assets. Robert and Kim's businesses succeeded because they acted, learned, and scaled, showing that anyone can start where they are. Learning by doing: the power of mistakes. Action isn't always smooth, and Rich Dad had a unique view on failure. In Chapter 17, Kiyosaki writes, "We learn by making mistakes. The school system punishes failure, but life rewards those who fall, learn, and keep going." Robert faced setbacks, like a real estate deal that collapsed due to poor due diligence. Instead of quitting, he analyzed the mistake, learned about property inspections, and succeeded in his next deal. This resilience fueled their success. An example from the book is James, a seminar participant who lost $1,000 on a stock trade. Devastated, he nearly gave up. But Robert encouraged him. "That loss is your tuition. What did it teach you?" James realized he'd invested without research. He studied technical analysis and tried again, earning a $2,000 profit on his next trade. His action, learning from failure, turned a loss into a lesson. Kiyosaki's advice: don't fear mistakes. Embrace them as teachers. Start small to minimize risk, but start. Each action, even a misstep, builds your financial education, making you stronger for the next move. Practical steps to leverage your actions. Section 3 ends with a call to act. Kiyosaki offers practical steps to leverage your actions, drawn from his and Kim's journey. First, pick one asset class: real estate, paper assets, or businesses, and take a small step. For real estate, visit an open house or read a book on rentals. For stocks, open a low-cost brokerage account and buy a single share. For business, start a side hustle like selling online. Second, commit to learning by doing. Expect mistakes, but analyze them to grow. Third, reinvest profits into more assets, compounding your wealth. A final example: Sarah, a teacher from Kiyosaki's seminars, wanted financial freedom but had no capital. She acted by starting a tutoring business, charging $20 an hour. She saved her earnings to buy a $500 stock, then used the dividends to fund a real estate course. By year 5, she owned a rental property, and her tutoring business ran with hired tutors, generating $2,500 a month. Sarah's small actions, leveraged over time, built her freedom. Conclusion: action is your bridge. In 1994, as Robert and Kim toasted their retirement on a Fiji beach, they reflected on the actions that brought them there. Section 3 of Rich Dad's Retire Young, Retire Rich is a rallying cry. Dreams and plans are nothing without action. By leveraging real estate, paper assets, and businesses, Robert and Kim turned their 1985 cabin plan into reality. Rich Dad's lessons: use good debt, invest with knowledge, build systems, learn from mistakes, are your blueprint. Your journey to retiring young and rich starts with a single action. Will you visit a property, buy a stock, or start a side hustle? The world rewards those who move, not those who wait. As Rich Dad said, inside you is a David, ready to slay the Goliath of fear. Take that first step today, and let action be your bridge to freedom. Section 4. The leverage of your first step. The final section of the book is a call to action, encapsulated in a single question from Rich Dad. What kind of world do you want to live in? Robert reflects on a profound moment in Fiji in 1994 after achieving financial freedom. Sitting on a pristine beach at sunrise, he and Kim celebrated their journey with a glass of champagne, surrounded by nature's abundance. It was here that Robert fully understood Rich Dad's teachings. Wealth isn't just about money. It's about freedom to live on your terms. The Fiji sunrise, a dream realized. The waves lapped gently against the shore in Fiji, the sky ablaze with pinks and oranges. It's 1994, and Robert and Kim Kiyosaki stand hand in hand, overwhelmed with gratitude. Just 9 years ago, they were nearly broke, their confidence shaken by a failed business. Yet, here they are, retired with $85,000 to $120,000 in annual passive income, spending less than $50,000 a year. How did they do it? It began with a single step, a decision to believe in a different reality. Section 4, starting in Chapter 18, is Kiyosaki's call to action. The leverage of your first step is the spark that ignites your journey to financial freedom. In that snowy British Columbia cabin on New Year's Day 1985, Robert, Kim, and their friend Larry Clark dared to dream of financial freedom. Facing a bleak financial reality, they could have retreated to safety, jobs, savings, a normal life. But Rich Dad's voice echoed in Robert's mind. What kind of world do you want to live in? This question, central to Chapter 19, became their guiding star. Section 4 is about choosing a world of abundance, taking that first step, and persevering through doubt and fear. Let's dive into Rich Dad's teachings and see how you can leverage your first step. Stepping through the looking glass. Rich Dad loved metaphors, and one of his favorites was the looking glass from Alice in Wonderland. In Chapter 19, Kiyosaki recounts a lesson from his youth. As a teenager, Robert complained to Rich Dad about not having enough money to invest. Rich Dad asked, "What would you do if there were no risk and no money required to become rich?" Robert scoffed, "That's impossible. Such a world doesn't exist." But Rich Dad smiled. "It exists in your mind. Step through the looking glass, and you'll see it." This idea, that wealth begins with believing in a world of abundance, is the heart of Section 4. Most people live in a world of scarcity or security, saying, "I'll never be rich," or "I need a safe job." Rich Dad challenged Robert to choose a different reality, one where money flows to those who solve problems. In 1985, Robert and Kim took their first step by deciding they wanted a world where money worked for them, not where they worked for money. This decision wasn't require capital, just courage. Kiyosaki shares an example from the book. A seminar attendee named John, a factory worker, and his wife Mary in their 30s. John and Mary dreamed of retiring early to travel, but felt trapped by their modest income. Inspired by Rich Dad's question, they asked themselves, what would we do in a world of abundance? They envisioned owning rental properties that funded their adventures. Their first step was small. They attended a real estate seminar, learning about low down payment deals. Within a year, they bought a small rental house, which sparked a rental that led to a second rental. By their 40s, their income allowed them to retire and travel part-time. John's first step, deciding abundance was possible, changed his reality. The book offers a practical exercise. Write down your vision of an abundant world. What would you do if money and risk weren't issues? Travel the world? Start a charity? This vision isn't fantasy. It helps you see opportunities others miss. Robert and Kim's Fiji sunrise was born from this vision, a first step taken in 1985 that reshaped their future. The power of why. Fuel for your first step. In Chapter 20, Kiyosaki asks, why do you want to retire young and rich? This, why, is your emotional anchor, the reason that pushes you through fear and doubt. Robert and Kim's why was freedom, freedom from financial worry to live on their terms and to make a difference. In 1985, they were tired of struggling, tired of fear of holding them back. Their why gave them the courage to take that first step, even when the how wasn't clear. A compelling example is Susan, a single mother from the book. Susan's why was to give her daughter a better life and to be a role model of independence. She worked as a retail clerk with little time or money. Her first step was to enroll in a free financial literacy course at her community center. This led her to a saving $25 a month, which she used to buy a stock paying dividends. Over the next few years, she saved enough to start a small online business selling handmade goods. By the age of 40, her business and investments produced $1,500 a month, enough to reduce her job hours and spend more time with her daughter. Susan's first step, fueled by her why, was to commit to learning, a lesson that set her on a path to freedom. Another story involves a couple, David and Lisa, who wanted to retire early to volunteer abroad. Their why was to give back to the world. Their first step was to research a small-scale business they could start with minimal capital. They launched a small vending machine business, placing machines in local gyms. The small profits funded their first rental property, and within 6 years they'd built enough income to retire and pursue their mission. Their why, service, kept them going through setbacks, proving that purpose powers action. Kiyosaki's lesson, your why is leverage. Ask yourself, why do I want financial freedom? Write it down, and let it when doubt creeps in. Your why will light the way for your first step, just as it did for Robert and Kim. Overcoming fear, the leap of faith. Taking a first step is scary, and Rich Dad knew it. In Chapter 21, How to Keep Going, Kiyosaki shares how he and Kim faced fear in 1985. After their business collapse, Robert doubted his ability to succeed again. Friends and family urged them to play it safe and get jobs. But Rich Dad taught, fear is the fence between you and your dreams. Your first step is jumping over it. Robert and Kim's first step was to commit to their cabin plan, refusing to return to their old reality of scarcity. An example from the book is Mark, a seminar participant who feared failure. A 40-year-old engineer, he wanted to invest in real estate, but worried about losing everything. His first step was to attend a real estate workshop where he learned about seller financing. Despite his fear, he made a low offer on a small rental property, which was accepted. The tenant's rent covered the mortgage, and Mark's confidence grew. Within 3 years, he owned 2 more properties, generating $1,200 a month. Mark's first step, acting despite fear, unlocked his potential. Kiyosaki offers a tip: start small to manage fear. Don't buy a skyscraper, try a single rental unit. Don't invest your life savings in stocks, buy 1 share. Small steps build courage, turning fear into fuel. Robert and Kim's first property deal was tiny, but it gave them the confidence to scale. Your first step doesn't need to be perfect, just take it. Learning by doing. The first steps lessons. Rich Dad believed life is the best teacher, and Chapter 21 emphasizes learning by doing. Robert shares a story from his early real estate days. In 1986, he and Kim made an offer on a condo, but misjudged the financing, and the deal fell through. Embarrassed, Robert wanted to quit, but Rich Dad said, your mistake is your tuition. What did it teach you? Robert learned to study loan terms, and their next deal succeeded. That first step, though flawed, was a lesson in leverage. Another example is Emily, a seminar attendee who wanted to start a business. Her first step was launching a small online store selling crafts. Sales were slow, and she lost $200 on ads. Instead of giving up, she studied marketing, adjusted her strategy, and turned a profit within a year. Her store grew to $1,000 a month, funding her first stock investment. Emily's first step taught her resilience. proving that action breeds wisdom. The book's lesson: your first step will likely include mistakes, but they're your greatest teachers. Act, learn, and keep going. Kiyosaki suggests reflecting after each step. What worked? What didn't? This habit turns action into education, amplifying your leverage. Practical steps to leverage your first step. Section 4 is a call to action, and Kiyosaki offers practical steps to get started. First, define your why. Write a sentence about why you want financial freedom, family, impact, and keep it visible. Second, choose one small action aligned with your vision. If it's real estate, visit an open house. If it's stocks, read a book on investing. If it's a business, list 5 ideas for a side hustle. Third, commit to learning from your action. After your first step, reflect on what you learned and take another. A final example: Peter, a teacher from Kiyosaki's seminars, wanted to retire by 50. His why was to spend time with his grandchildren. His first step was saving $50 a month by cutting subscriptions, which he used to buy a dividend stock. The $10 annual dividend was small, but it motivated him to learn about rentals. Within 4 years, he owned a duplex, earning $800 a month. Peter's first step, saving $50, sparked a chain of actions that led to freedom. Conclusion: your first step, your future. As the sun rose over that Fiji beach, Robert squeezed Kim's hand, knowing their first step in 1985 had led to this moment. Section 4 of Rich Dad's Retire Young, Retire Rich is a reminder. Your first step is your greatest leverage. By choosing a world of abundance, finding your why, overcoming fear, and learning by doing, you can start where you are and build a life of freedom. Rich Dad's question: what kind of world do you want to live in? Is yours to answer. Will you step through the looking glass? Your first step today could be the spark that lights your path to retiring young and rich. Conclusion: becoming your own David. As the sun set on that Fiji beach, Robert squeezed Kim's hand, overwhelmed with gratitude. They had done it. Retired young, retired rich, not because they started with money, but because they leveraged their minds, plans, and actions. Retire Young, Retire Rich is more than a financial guide. It's a manifesto for breaking free from the prison of fear and scarcity. Like David facing Goliath, Robert and Kim used leverage to defeat their doubts and build a life of freedom. The book's core message is that everyone has the potential to be rich, but few tap into it because they fear or abuse leverage. Your mind is your greatest asset. Use it to question limiting beliefs and adopt rich words. Your plan is your roadmap. Make it fast, focused, and aimed at assets, not paychecks. Your actions are your bridge to freedom. Build real estate, paper assets, or businesses that work for you. And your first step is a decision to live in a world of abundance, not scarcity. Kiyosaki doesn't promise an easy road. There will be setbacks, doubts, and failures. But as Rich Dad taught, inside each of us is a David and a Goliath. The small person becomes a giant by choosing the context of a giant. By embracing leverage, learning from mistakes, and taking action, you can become your own David, slaying the giants of fear and limitation. As we close, ask yourself, what's your why? Why do you want to retire young and rich? Is it freedom, security, or the ability to make a difference? Whatever it is, let it drive you through the looking glass to a new reality. The tools are in your hands, your mind, your plan, your actions. The question is, will you use them? Thank you for joining us on this journey through Rich Dad's Retire Young, Retire Rich. May you find the courage to leverage your potential and create the life you dream of. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep pushing toward financial freedom.